Hey guys, I'm JanetOnOccasion, and today we are looking at another chunk of a roster. That's right, another chunk of a roster. We're looking at Tzeentch today. So, caveats. I know, hate to stop it right away, but caveats. So this footage was sent to me by Creative Assembly, so I'm not in charge of the camera or anything. This is just a video that I'm looking at. This video is also a 1080p video, but I am recording it in 2K. So if you think it looks a bit crap for 2K, that's why. It's not actually in 2K. I just don't want to lose any more information by further compressing it. So bear that in mind. Also, I made my cursor all big in case I need to point to anything, so it won't get confusing between my cursor and the other cursor. Isn't that fun? Isn't that a fun trick? My cursor's all big. Anyway, so we're doing that, and we'll talk about most of the roster, but of course this is in battle, so there's only be one Lord, isn't there? Yeah, there's only one Lord. They can't have every Lord choice. So it's not the whole roster. There's going to be stuff missing, not necessarily just from the Lords and Heroes options, but other stuff too could be missing. This is just a selection of stuff. Okay, brilliant. I think that's all the caveats. Cool, let's look at it. So, first off, we have Blue Horrors of Tzeentch. In fact, let's go right to the beginning, just so we can see the scary, spooky thing in the background. So this is one thing that I can't tell if I like or not, but it seems that the depth of field effects are a little bit more in line with something like Three Kingdoms or Troy, but I don't like that it's not focusing on this thing, because I really want to get a good look at this thing. This weird eyeball tower covered in wings. It's a right mess. Anyway, let's crack on and see these Blue Horrors of Tzeentch. They look great in action, you know, moving around like that. They look fantastic. And I'm someone who thinks that Blue Horrors just look stupid, just generally. They look stupid, but they look fitting for what they are. The animation with, you know, what they're working with, I like. I think it looks good. I think they've made them look, you know, natural, if that's the word to use. I have no idea. Anyway, they look natural. So, they cause fear. They hide in forests. They have physical resistance of 20%, and of course they're demonic. So like all demonic units for all demonic rosters, it's similar to being undead. As soon as their leadership is broken, they take damage rather than running away. So that's all great, but we want to look at their stats as well. So you can see they have 5 ammunition, which isn't a huge amount, but range of 90, again, it's quite short range. But that 21 missile strength isn't actually terrible, especially when it's fire and magic damage. So they're not going to be bad for like a bit of harassment, something similar to like a Stati or something from Rome, you know, just like a few noxious flaming vomits, and then run in and start attacking stuff with, again, magic flaming melee damage as well, which is very cool. But also they do have a barrier. Annoyingly, there doesn't seem to be an indication of how much their barrier is. But remember, all Tzeentch units, as you can see from their little icons at the bottom, that little blue icon along the top of every health bar is their barrier. So it's damage they can take, like temporary hit points, and that will recharge like a shield in, I don't know, Mass Effect or something. You know, they stay out of combat and they'll get that barrier back. But it doesn't say what the value is on that, which I think is a bit disappointing. But judging from the gameplay that you're likely to see today, it's not a huge amount, but it can shrug off a hit or two, so that's something. So, 160 units as well. So actually, if you times that 5 ammunition by 160, and then times that again by the 21 damage it can do, that's a huge amount of damage potential, just from their missile attacks before they get stuck in. So, bear that in mind. So, what is next? Oh, okay, the Pink Horrors. That's not a surprise. Hello, Pink Horrors. So they're slightly butch older brothers. So only 80 in a unit, so half as many, as is tradition. They cause fear, and by the looks of it, they cause fear, hide in forests, have physical resistance, and they're demons. So the big problem with this, that I think is deeply upsetting, is the fact that these Pink Horrors have no ability anywhere that says when they die, they split and turn into 2 Blue Horrors, which is the thing. That's like the one thing they're known for doing, and that doesn't seem to be present. And I think it's just the limitations of the engine. I think they could have had some serious problems with it, making that work in a way that felt appropriate to the lore, because it's a bit of a unique thing to have to do in a war game to have this happen. There have been sort of like boring, sort of crappy, half-assed versions of that. So things like Morga the Shadow Gave, you know, if an enemy is below like a 20% health, you can use an ability on them that deletes that unit, and in their place it summons another unit. But, I mean, is that something they could do? Like, maybe if this unit of Pink Horrors gets below 50% health, then it dies, and then spawns 2 blue horrors. But then how do you sort of I don't know, how do you cater to that for, like, the battle's over, is the unit dead now? Or do you just make it so pink horrors can never be wiped out? Or do they only get wiped out if the blue horrors die? So there's these weird other things, as well as them actually coming into the battlefield in the first place, you know, or having a unit that has more than one sort of model in it with their own calculations. Like, none of it quite fits into Total War, sadly. So I get why it'd be difficult, but it's very sad to see that they don't seem to have come up with a decent workaround for it. So that's a pity, but it is what it is. I guess we'll just have to live with it. But anyway, pink horrors. In fact, let's have a quick look at pink horrors again. I know I just looked at them, literally, but I mean, ammunition, 20, so these are the more, you know, focused on ranged, which is another reason why if you have half of their health go away, you don't want them suddenly to disappear, because you're like, well, I was using them to shoot a guy, so you wouldn't really want that to happen anyway, so it doesn't quite fit with Total War, sadly, but, so I get it, but I'm disappointed in the same way. It's an odd one. It's a difficult situation, but whatever. But yeah, big weapon strength, missile strength rather, at 28, 130 range, so still fairly short range, but that damage in you know, magic fire damage. They got a lot of potential for what is essentially quite a cheap unit. It's kind of a staple unit in the roster. So they're going to be very scary en masse, I think. Then we have the Exalted Pink Horrors, which are the Pink Horrors' other big brothers. So these ones, you can tell they're Exalted because they got big horns. Apparently that's how that works. But yeah, even higher weapon strength at 33, but much the same unit. They're better in melee as well, with 30 melee attack and 38 melee defense. You know, more weapon strength. They're just a pretty flat upgrade from the previous stuff, which, yep, that suits me fine. Just better horrors. So that's fine. Oh, also they have Arcane Mirth, which is a new ability. So when they're out of melee, you get plus 20% power recharge. So these guys will be good to have just in an army. Just bring one in an army, any army you have, because you'll just get more magic out of your, you know, out of your battle. And that's when they're out of melee, which, well, they're predominantly a ranged unit, so that's perfect. Pretty damn handy. And of course they're demons. So same old there. Next up we have Forsaken of Tzeentch, which look very Tzeentchy. This to me looks more like I don't know if it's like the lighting or what, but something about the implementation of Tzeentch in Total War, to me it kind of evokes the sort of Lovecraftian horror elements more, you know? I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the way they move or something, but it feels more like, you know, something out of like a Cthulhu story. A lot of this stuff. It just feels more in line with that. I don't know why, but it seems to evoke that. I'd love to be able to tell you exactly what it is. It could just be the fact that it's, you know, that colour blue. I really don't know. But something about it, just this reeks of Lovecraftian horror to me. But anyway, so Forsaken, they're Forsaken. I mean, it's pretty standard. They got magic damage because they're the Tzeentch variant. But yeah, they're basically just... oh, and they've also got some spell resistance at 40%, which is pretty significant. But yeah, they're very much in line with what you'd expect a Tzeentch-flavoured Forsaken unit to be. Just, you know, fairly quick, fairly well armoured, damage dealing, infantry. Good to have though, for sure. Then we have the Flamers of Tzeentch. Now these guys look so spooky. I love the lighting effects that these guys have around their unit. I think they're going to just make battles look incredible, even if I think they look a bit dumb as well. Most of the Tzeentch units, you know, just look like nothing else. And so to me, it's just like, they just all look a bit goofy. But it's taste. I get that a lot of people love how the Tzeentch stuff looks, and that's fine. You know, I love that you do. But I think they all look a bit goofy. But with the lighting effects and everything, again, it feels very grounded in reality. It feels like, I don't know, it's believable now that I'm seeing it in motion. It doesn't look goofy and stupid and that can't possibly exist. It looks goofy and stupid, but I'm scared of it now. You know what I mean? It evokes something better. So just seeing it in the flesh, I think, helps a lot. So yeah, Flamers of Tzeentch, looking very scary. Very ghoulish. So they cause fear, they have physical resistance of 20%, and of course they are demonic. But the main thing is their missile strength is pretty huge at 338 when there's 12 in a unit. That is a considerable amount of firepower. Also, are you going to hover over the other effect? Go on, do it. Yes! They hovered over Warp Flame. So Warp Flame adds a debuff to your enemies, which lowers their armor by 15. which just means that more missile damage is going to register from any source, you know. Well, any damage from any source is going to register higher, which is nice. Except, I guess, armor piercing, which will stay the same because it doesn't matter. But anyway, weakness to fire damage, plus 11%. When most of your army is doing fire damage, that just means an extra 11% damage to that thing from all sources, basically. Maybe not the Forsaken, but like pretty much everything else. All your pink horrors, your blue horrors, you know, all that stuff is going to do more damage to that enemy that you're focusing on. So huge damage potential, huge like burst damage potential if you get all of your ranged units to focus on one guy. It's going to be very scary. Also, these things are no joke in melee either. 46 weapon strength isn't huge for something with 12, 12 models, but that's going to add up with all the extra debuffs and the extra sorts of damage that you can do. This is going to have some really niche uses for things that are like weak to fire, for instance. You're still going to be able to do some good work in melee against them. So pretty cool stuff. Really sort of multi-use units. But yeah, really bizarre. Low armor at 10 though. Very low armor at 10, so you're going to want to keep them out of harm's way. And only 90 range is pretty low too, so yeah, if you shoot them down, or I guess get like some shot cavalry on them, you could probably take them out pretty quickly. But the damage potential they have is pretty great. So here, the Exalted Flamer of Tzeentch. So just like a Flamer, but tooler, I guess. Pretty great. Just a tool Flamer. So it causes fear, because of course they do, but it's a single model unit, so it has wounds, which we haven't talked about in this video, but I have talked about it in the other, chunks of roster videos that I've shown today or perhaps yesterday. I don't really know what my schedule is yet, how I'm spacing these out, but whatever. In the other bunch of stuff that is coming out this holiday season. So wounds basically means if there's a single model, so a dragon or a dinosaur or this guy, when they are below 50% health, they will take some debuffs, so they will lose some weapon damage with a 20% debuff, armor piercing weapon damage will go down by 20%, their speed will go down by 10%, which better reflects the every other unit in the game, where every other unit, whether it be, infantry or cavalry or whatever, as it takes damage, models start to die and the unit becomes less powerful. Just because it's been in combat for longer. As units start to, as models start to die, it can't sort of fulfill its potential anymore. Whereas single models, unless they were routed or killed, would be identically good no matter how much damage they took. So if you have an unbreakable unit with 1 health, it can still do as much damage and be as capable as something with full health, which was a bit silly. So this is just a nice way to actually reward people for damaging a single entity model, which I think is a good thing, I think that's a good thing. So that's what's been added here. Next up we have physical resist at 20%, and finally it's demonic, just like all the other demons, but the missile strength on this guy, 1.4k. And that can also add that fire weakness of 11%. So that's going to be another 140 damage. That's huge. That is absolutely massive. So you get the Exalted Flamer Tzeentch and a bunch of the other Flamers, everything, firing at something. It's going to go down really quickly. It's going to go down really quickly. Also, this one, pretty good weapon strength at 365 with armor piercing. It's not huge. It's only got 10 armor still, so this isn't a unit that you want to throw in and, into the thick of combat. It's only got 90 range. So yes, it hits like an absolute truck, but it has the range of a truck. So it's, when you can get it lined up, you're going to get some great work done with it. But you are going to have to work hard to get a lot of Tzeentch's units into a good spot to be able to really maximize their damage. But it's going to be up to the person they're playing against to really make sure that the Tzeentch player can't take advantage of all these huge, huge sort of glass cannon units they've got. So I'm excited. This is going to lead to great strategies on both sides. So yeah, Exalted Flamer Tzeentch, very scary. Very scary indeed. Only 10 ammo though, which isn't all of it, but that's, 14,000 damage potentially. Well, more with certain debuffs. But anyway, Spawn of Tzeentch, I think they look great. I love this new flavour of Chaos Spawn. The tentacles on the back are really fantastic. And very Lovecraftian, let's be honest. So, armor, 10. They have pretty good melee attack. They have armor sundering, which is really cool to see. They're a lot more like the weird Spawn that we had as the Regiment of Renown, which I think makes sense because they were supposed to be kind of Tzeentch flavoured, so it makes a lot of sense that. So 130 weapon strength, and they're Chaos Spawn. That's basically it. They're Chaos Spawn like any other Chaos Spawn. So big damage dealers, big sort of damage sponges, offer a lot of mass that you can throw in the front line, but low armor, but they're unbreakable, so semi-disposable, chunky damage dealer monsters. So, Chaos Furies next. So, Furies look really cool. They're really menacing. I think they look really great. You almost expect Furies to look almost more weedy, more sort of impish, but of course this is Warhammer, and everything has to be, you know, ramped up to 11, especially when the Chaos roster also exists in the 40k universe, where you can't really have some, like, weird little impish thing go toe-to-toe with a Space Marine. No, they have to have abs. Okay? Even your basic imps have to have abs, or it would just make no sense. No one would believe that they had any purpose. So anyway, Chaos Furies with their abs. So, Vanguard, they're very fast. Very fast. 110 speed, that is crazy quick. Really fast. So these are going to be great harassing units. For sure. Pretty good melee attack at 36. Very low melee defense at 18. And with low armor at 20, I think it's going to be quite easy to pick these guys off with crossbowmen and similar units, you know. Just peasant bowmen or something. You know, peasant archers. Kill a bunch of them nice and quickly. But pretty big weapon strength. Pretty big weapon strength, and that speed is no joke. So these are going to be very interesting units for harassing the back line. And more interesting than your usual affair of, like, throwing wolves or something in the back line. These will be really interesting. Very cool stuff indeed. So they do cause fear, and they do Vanguard, and they also have Can Fly, which is an important thing to point out, because if we look down here, this is the flying toggle down here. So you don't have to have the default stance to be to fly anymore. Now you pick between what you want their default to be when you give them orders, which I really like. I think that's the best solution for that, if they were going to implement it at all. I think in the Cathay lineup, is it Cathay lineup or the Khorne one? In one of the other videos I talk about it, and presumably if you're watching this, you're probably going to want to look at the other rosters too, and you'll hear my thoughts on flying and how that works now, and why I don't actually mind if they put this in or not. But hey, it's in now, and I think they did it in a way that I'm happy with. So there we go. So 20% physical resist, and also they are demonic. Pretty typical. They got the magic damage because, of course, they're Tzeentchy. Then we have Screamers of Tzeentch. You're going to zoom in a little bit more. Good. So these things look amazing. A million eyes. They look just like there are creatures that look like this in an episode of Doctor Who, which I think is really funny. It's the one. It was an Easter special with David Tennant where they ended up on a desert planet, and there were things that looked exactly like this but made out of metal, and one got stuck in an engine of a spaceship and made it crash. If you haven't seen that episode, then I don't know, look it up. It's a good episode. Yeah, it's an alright episode. The episode will do. It's a good season. Anyway, enough about Doctor Who. Screamers of Tzeentch. I think these guys are just terrifying. I mean, look at them. They look a bit derpy again. It's just like, you know, the expression. It's just, oh, I can't believe this is what I look like. But, you know, whatever. They're fine. Anti-large, which is interesting. And big armor-piercing damage. Melee attack and melee defense are quite low, which is interesting. You know, when they hit, it's going to hit for quite a lot, and that anti-large bonus could be quite significant. An anti-large bonus does add to your melee attack, so these, to me, strike me as a very specialised unit. They either attack large units, or you get them out of there. Okay? Just don't even bother. Maybe harass the back line a bit, because they're flying, and that just makes them useful, but so be it. So, Screamers of Tzeentch, very cool looking. They cause fear, of course they do. They have Vanguard deployment, and that's very scary. And 85 speed. I mean, it's not the 110 speed from the other guys, but 85 is still huge. Low armor, though. They can fly, obviously. Physical resistance 20%, and they're demonic. Typical. So, also, must be said, although everything in this roster has 20 armor, they all have barrier. They all have a barrier. So they can all take some damage before they actually take any damage, which is very important. It means that rather than having the armor sort of keep you going, like, in a battle in the long run, it's shock tactics. You run in, get some damage in, and you get out just as your barrier's dropping. Wait for that to recharge, go in again. You know, that's what you want to do. Let the barrier negate your damage as you cycle your units through. But how successful they're all going to be at that, I don't know. Maybe you'll only be able to cycle a couple of units just because, you know, the barrier's not that substantial, so you can't really afford to have every unit sort of play by those rules. Who knows? I don't know how to be balanced, but whatever the case, that's kind of the thing. You let the barrier take the damage, and the armor is irrelevant, you know? Because you don't want to be in prolonged combat. So, these guys just look awesome. So these are our, you know, our mortal additions to the roster here. The Doom Knights of Tzeentch. So these guys speed of 105, which is so big for a unit like this. There's 24 models in this unit, which is pretty big size. 80 weapon strength, melee attack at 44, melee defense at 36, 100 armor with silver shields. So you can't even just, like, you know, shoot them out the sky or anything. No, very quick units that are going to come in having been harassed almost not at all, and they're going to hit for big damage with that 52 charge bonus, that 80 weapon strength, and they will be able to survive for a long time in combat. Or, being as quick as they are, you can still just zip them out of combat, wait for their barriers to come back, and run in again for another charge. It's scary. Like, I really don't know what the best use of these units will be, whether it's to hit and run or just to stay in combat. I feel like you could do either with them. These are absolute powerhouses. So very cool to see. They cause fear, because of course they do. They have Vanguard. They have Vanguard. You can even sneak these in around the back somewhere. It's madness. And of course they can fly. They do have the flying toggle, so you can have them on the ground if you like. But I'm not sure why you would. So these guys, Chaos Knights of Tzeentch. So they're just Chaos Knights, but, you know, emblazoned in the correct colours. It's basically just a palette swap as far as I can tell. Nothing too fancy, but it's nice to see some Chaos Knights. So they cause fear, and they can hide in trees. But it's good just to have a reliable sort of knight unit with any roster. And I also like how Tzeentch's sort of mortal like units feel more traditional somehow, because his units are more crazy. So the fact that his units are like absolutely ridiculous, he does weirdly tend to have more sort of academics and like sort of more devout followers, given his sort of, you know, his whole magic sphere. It tends to be more learned people flock to him. So yeah, having a more sort of strategically minded bunch I think is interesting, given how like doolally the rest of his roster is. So I like that's reflected with the unit picks that they've, you know, the Creative Assembly have made for them. And now here we have the Soul Grinder, which I'd say looks really great because, hang on, can we, I mean, sort of. You could sort of get a look at what his face is like, but he's got a beak. So he does look like a little bit more Tzeentch themed in more than just his colour, which I think is good. I think generally this is a unit which I mentioned in the Khorne video as well. Suits Khorne to the ground. The other, you know, the other Chaos Gods, not quite as much. With the Soul Grinder, it's a very generic look, which just fits Khorne because it's just heavy metal, isn't it? But with this, I don't know. I think they've done a good job. Like the colour, I think is fine, and the fact that he's more beaky, he evokes more of that look. But the apparatus that he's walking around on still doesn't say much of Tzeentch to me. It still kind of reeks of Khorne, but palette swapped. You know what I mean? Just the structure doesn't quite feel right, which I get. You know, it's one model fits all in the tabletop, so whatever the case, it's fine. But I can see why it's a contentious thing for some people. I'm sure once they're in the thick of combat, no one will really notice, but, you know, it's a Soul Grinder. Everyone knows a Soul Grinder's contentious. So, he causes fear, he's a siege attacker, he causes terror, because of course he does. He has wounds, which all single models do, of course, and physical resist 20%, and he's a demon! But, with this guy, his missile strength is anti-large focused. I'm pretty sure it's higher than the Khorne one. He has more of an emphasis on being a ranged unit than not. Also, he does, it's a bit of a shame actually, he does magic damage with his shots, but not fire, which means he doesn't synergize with all of the flamers that cause the fire damage, like the fire weakness debuffs on enemies. So this guy won't synergize well with the rest of the roster, even though he is themed more in line with the rest of the roster. You understand what I mean? So, you know, the roster is big on range damage, but he doesn't synergize with the debuffs that would otherwise help out the ranged damaging units. He's sort of left out in the cold in that regard, which I think is a bit of a pity. Just generally, I think that's a bit of a missed opportunity. But this is under development, and it's all subject to change, so who knows? Who knows what will happen in the end? But I think that's definitely something that I'd like to see, him doing some fire damage. So, on to the next one.
On your word.
Cultist of Tzeentch. So this is your fire caster, Cultist of Tzeentch. So he looks like a cultist. You know, he's got a silly mask on. Done. So he has, if we go back a second. I went back too much. If we go back a second. Okay, so we can see he looks like a spellcaster. His stat line, low armor, you know, speed in line with him being on a horse because he's on one. Melee attack and defense are both, you know, like low to middling. Weapon strength, quite low. And charge bonus, he's on a horse, so kind of bare minimum 30, really. So whatever. His stats, as you'd expect. But he does have a barrier, because he's in the Tzeentch roster. So he might be able to shrug off a big hit early on, rather than just being sniped immediately, so that's something. But he has a Power Stone, so only one use, but that does give him a big bonus to power recharge, just like it does in Warhammer 2. Then we've got the Gate of Tzeentch, which summons a unit of pink horrors. So I like that. I like that just as a cultist, he has this ability. He can only use it once, but I like that he's got this, being a follower of Tzeentch, even though his chosen law of magic is of fire. So that's really cool. I really like that a lot. So we've got Burning Head, we got Flame Storm, we've got Piercing Bolts of Burning, we got Fireball, we've got Flaming Sword of Ruin, we've got Cascading Fire Cloak. So he's got all of the, you know, law of fire, as you'd expect. Encourage, so extra leadership for nearby units. He can hide in a forest. He has wounds, because all single models do now. Kindle Flame, so again, more weakness to fire, so great synergy with the rest of the roster, because that is a different weakness to fire debuff than the other one, so you can actually end up with a 31% weakness to fire damage just from him casting while flamers are shooting at somebody. Everything else getting in with that fire damage, you can do an extra 3rd damage, which is crazy. Like, that's crazy high, which is why it'd be nice if the Soul Grinder could get in on that action, but anyway. Then we have the Wand of Whimsy. So, oh, every time we cast, huh? Oh, that's fun. So we've got another casting ability here, thanks to this item. So the Wand of Whimsy gives a base weapon damage plus 12% and melee attack plus 12. Is that just for him, or is that for everybody? I don't know if that's map-wide like the other one is. Let's have a look. So that one... Not that one. Okay, I have to play. There we go. So, this one, Effect Range Infinite, is how it's described now. No, go... Oh, wait. Effect range infinite. Effect range infinite for the Wand of Whimsy. So yeah, that is map wide, so that should be all of your units would get plus 12 melee attack whenever he casts. I mean, that's kind of huge. That reminds me of the Bonewood staff for, God, what's his name? You know, the dancing orc, everyone's favourite orc. I'm bad with names, leave me alone. Anyway, it reminds me of that. And then 15% missile resist, because all heroes have 15% missile resist. And yep, there's his abilities. And then next up, we have an Iridescent Horror, who's in the sky. Check him out. Yeah, mounted on a chariot. Looks amazing. He's got a couple of friends with him, which I don't think is how his model was. I don't think the original model, like on tabletop, he had friends with him. But that's really cool to see. So Iridescent Horror, 30 melee attack, 24 melee defense. Some alright weapon strength, because it's got the armor piercing, but he's predominantly a caster, so, you know. But yeah, cool to see, actually. Interesting to have, like, a chariot unit that's flying. Because I'm not sure we'll necessarily be using this like a chariot, because, you know, he doesn't have the anti-infantry for a start. And I don't know if he'll sort of damage everything near him like you would. Or if this is just, I don't know if you'd use him like a caster on an eagle. I have no idea. I don't know what the sort of use case will be for this guy. But he does have a missile attack as well, which is very cool. And missile strength, 375. And of course it is fire and magic damage, so that fire damage, all of the fire damage buffs, they will apply to him. So it's pretty cool to see. So as far as spells are concerned, let's have a look. We've got Locus of Change. So this will give extra armor-piercing missile damage and base missile damage. So we can augment, give that to the greater, what's the name? It's not the greater Flamer of Tzeentch, but you know what I mean. The better Flamer of Tzeentch unit, the single model, and just think how much damage you could do with that guy. Pink Fire of Tzeentch. So this will actually imbue Warp Flame, which is the same debuff as all the Flamers imbue on enemies. So if you don't have any Flamers, you could still use this. Or if you want to get a weakness somewhere where the Flamers can't reach yet, then that is still really good. So it's a expanding tier-shaped attack. So very nice to see. Just a nice little, you know, damage spell with an addition of a debuff. Same with the Blue Fire of Tzeentch. So this I love. I hate spells that just do damage. I love spells that do damage and then you can like capitalize on further by clever use of the units you have. I think that's great. That adds way more tactical opportunities, which is really nice. Then Treason of Tzeentch, which lowers leadership by 16. Then we've got Glean Magic, which on yourself, it adds to your power recharge and your reserves, and the enemy loses power recharge and their reserves. So you siphon magic from the enemy with Glean Magic, which is very cool. Reaching into his enemy's mind, the spellcaster steals their sorcery for his own diabolical use. Then we have Tzeentch's Firestorm. Again, this imbues Warp Flame, which is really good to see. So 3 randomly moving area of effects, I guess. 3 damaging rifts spreading outwards. Blistering balls of scarlet flame emanate from the spellcaster to engulf the foe in deadly balefire. Very cool stuff. Infernal Gateway, which I completely missed. Oops. Let's get that back again. Infernal Gateway, huge stationary area of effect, so just a big vortex spell that's going to damage people. From the description, that reminds me of Pit of Shades. A portal to the realm of chaos opens a magical tear in the mortal plane that sucks those nearby inside to face certain madness, if not their doom. Scary. Scary stuff. So again, damage per second is very low at 5. But of course, if it's a big area, then every model caught in that unit will take damage. So use this against groups of enemies, not like a single dude. But looks great. He causes fear. He encourages nearby units. He can fire while moving, which is really nice. So you can use them more like a chariot, and those pretty good ranged attacks are going to kick off as well, which is nice. And also, it might be more like Luther Harkon, where when he's in combat, you know, his Terrorgeist will be biting people and he'll be shooting at them as well. So you might be able to double up on damage using this guy. Could be cool. He can fly, yeah, obviously. And wounds, because he's a single model. Even though it's, you know, 2 things pulling 3 things about, it's a single model. Fires of Change puts up damage resistance for the army, because effect range is infinite, so that seems to give everybody 9 seconds of 11% damage resistance, which seems really good. I like the sound of that. Physical resistance 20%, and of course he's demonic. Brilliant. Next up we have a Lord of Change, which of course looks a lot like Sarthoriel, you know, the Everwatcher, of course. Same type of lad. So, Lord of Change. So very similar, I imagine. He'll work very similarly, but one thing you might have noticed is he's in the air. He can fly. So that's really fun. He does, of course, have the flying toggle. And here, he does have some Tzeentch spells. So he has the Pink Fire of Tzeentch, which is cool to see. So I'm not sure if... I don't think this Lord of Change counts as a hero, actually. I think this might count as a unit. He just happens to have access to those spells. Potentially. But maybe not. Maybe not. It is given the fact that this guy, if we look down here with the big cursor... he doesn't have the ring showing his spells like a hero or lord choice would, you see. But he's selected, and you can see the spells over here that have access, which means that bound spells, as they were in Warhammer 2, may not work the same way as they used to. It might still actually cost you wins of magic. It's just they have those spells and they work as spells, which is actually an interesting thing to see, because that might really change how a lot of the units in Warhammer 1 work that have bound spells. Even the likes of maybe Mazdamundi or something, where he's got the Banishment and Ruination of Cities, they might cost wins of magic now, if that's how bound spells are going to be used universally. So that's an interesting little thing to see. Who knows? Who knows how that'll be implemented, but certainly for this guy, that seems to be the case. So anyway, Pink Fire of Tzeentch, of course, is that teardrop that does that puts on Warp Flame. He also has the Blue Fire of Tzeentch. He's a siege attacker. He can cause fear. He can cause terror. He can fly. He has wounds. And what's this one? Fires of Change. That's the damage resistance when he casts. And he has 20% physical resist, and he's demonic. But yeah, that melee attack at 45, melee defense at 45, those are some pretty good stats. And if he has the same kind of attacks as Sarthoriel, where he like lumbers through and just like nothing can stop him, you know, has that almost like uninterruptible charge animation, then he could be incredibly powerful. Like flying into somewhere useful, landing, and then just staying on the ground, just hopping between units. I think he could be quite formidable. I think he'd be quite formidable indeed. I'm looking forward to seeing him in action. So that's a lot of fun. And then, finally, we have Kairos Fateweaver. Thanks for echoing what I was saying. It only seems right if his name is uttered twice, given the fact that he has 2 heads. So he starts off with a bunch of abilities, similar stat line to the Lord of Change there as well, but lower melee defense. 20 melee defense is very, very low. That is not very high for a Lord, that is for sure. But he has Oracle of Eternity, which is a 22-second damage resistance ward save, which is huge. 44% is gigantic. Every 90 seconds. Though it's 90 seconds and it's 22 seconds of it being active and then 90 seconds again. So really it's every 2 minutes. You know, almost a quarter of the time he can have that 44% damage resistance up, which is pretty good. Pretty damn good. Also, Gaze of Fate. It stops enemies from being able to move and lowers their melee attack by 40. He can use this 3 times per battle, which is very significant. Void Pendulum, which is power recharge, and reserves go down. This is a hex, so you use this on your enemies. And you can only use it on spellcasters. So this is actually something that is an upgrade from Warhammer 2. There are a lot of effects like this that lowered enemy spell recharge, but you could use them on any enemy. So you'd be like, haha, take that, swordsman, and that would be fine. So the fact that we got something that affects Winds of Magic and you actually have to use it on the enemy spellcaster, I think makes a lot more sense. So I'm glad that's a thing that they've added there as like an identifier for where you can cast spells. And hopefully that'll be retroactively added to, you know, all of the different abilities that affect Winds of Magic for your enemies, because that makes a lot of sense. Scroll of Destiny. So this we can only use once per battle. Augments the winds. Augment of the Winds. It's an area of effect that puts up reserves per second. So I wonder if this is if you have a big group of your units, or maybe even enemies, just a big group. Use this on a big group, and depending on how many people there are in that group, it'll augment the Winds of Magic more. Because there are abilities that do that sort of thing. So I'm assuming it's doing that. Staff of Tomorrow! Decrease cooldowns by 120 seconds. That is significant. And you can do that every couple of minutes, which is really cool. And 29-second duration. That seems a weird thing to have a duration on when it just lowers cooldowns, but sure, why not? So, tomorrow is a new day, when one can make a fresh start in all areas of endeavour. Regrowth. Just a very powerful Law of Life spell that he has. Clearly, that's one of his fragments things, one of those abilities that swaps out his own spells, like Law of Tzeentch spells, for spells from other Laws of Magic. So he's gone with Life this game, so he's got Regrowth. And Harmonic Convergence, that's from Heavens, though. Okay, that's confusing. I guess in multiplayer that works a little differently, because that's Law of Heaven, so he has Law of Life and Law of Heaven spells in one battle. So now I have no idea how that thing functions, but we'll find out. Penumbral Pendulum, that's Law of Shadows. What is going on? What is going on with you, Kairos? I guess you just pick these up as spells rather than having to equip something in custom battles. So this is just a selection of random spells that he can unlock, in addition to the ones he would normally have, I guess. Hard to say. Blue Fire of Tzeentch, cool. Glean Magic. Tzeentch's Firestorm. Okay, so how his thing is supposed to work in campaign is you equip an item, and it's one item per Law of Magic. Per those 8 Laws of Magic. And depending on what you equip, it'll swap out a couple of his normal spell selection for a couple of a different one. But it seems in custom battle, you literally just have access to all of the spells, and I guess it just says, equip a maximum of 6 spells, and you can pick and mix all of them, which actually sounds amazing. It makes him sound like he'll be much better in multiplayer than in campaign, which is unusual, but interesting. I like they give you that flexibility. I don't know if that'll stay like that, or if this is some phase of the design which is no longer, no longer pertinent, I suppose. We'll find out, I guess. So, Siege Attacker, because of course, causes fear and terror. I mean, look at him. Encourage. He can fly, yep. He has wounds. He's a single model with 2 heads, okay? It doesn't matter. Still counts as 1. Life Leeching. So again, he didn't have any Law of Death spells, but he does have the Law of Death lore attribute, which is interesting. So he gets extra reserves per second every time he casts. And he also has Fires of Change, which is the Tzeentch passive, so for that damage resistance. And he has Greater Arcane Conduit, which is a passive, but also, as well as the power recharge, also Spell Mastery plus 10%. And I don't know what that means. I don't know what Spell Mastery refers to, because we haven't had a proper breakdown of all the spell mechanics yet. But that's interesting. See, Spell Mastery plus 10%. Physical Resistance plus 20%, and of course he's Demonic. All the usual. And, yeah, and he's got his, all of his abilities down there. Many abilities. It's a lot of abilities. Which is really cool to see. A lot of unique effects. And now we have the unique Tzeentchian army abilities, which is great to see. So we have Arcane Surge, so that's power recharge, plus 80%. That's pretty significant. So get a big burst of magic. Affected units, spellcasters, yep. Then we have Bolt of Change, a medium strike area. Pretty big damage. The ranged damage and explosive damage there is pretty significant, and it sunders armor. So I don't know if this would lock on to a target or what, but it looks like this would actually be quite good at like big monsters and things. Something like a Stegodon that, you know, it's going to be fairly immobile. You might be able to hit with this for some good chunky damage. So very cool that. And then finally we have Storm of Fire, which is a large strike area. Less damage, but of course with a bigger area you're going to hit more models. So this would be better used against big groups of units of enemies rather than like single models. And it does fire and magic damage, which means you can take advantage of all of the ridiculous debuffs that you got going on in the rest of the army, which is nice to see. And so how do we unlock them? Points generated by casting spells with the Winds of Magic. So presumably this means that after you've spent 100 Winds of Magic, this levels up by 1? I guess that would have to be it, right? Or else it'd be a bit weird, because that would be the easiest way to track that sort of thing. So, yeah, I guess that's it. That seems like a lot of Winds of Magic, though, which implies that there's a lot more magic to be had in this game than in the previous one. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see all this in action. So that's going to be how you put that ability up, and how you unlock the next ones. Because as you can see, if we have a look, this is open, and this bar will fill up, and then it'll unlock the next ability. So you'll start with this bottom ability, and you'll work your way up to the different abilities, which will have their own cooldowns. So that's how that works. But yeah, it looks good. Awesome. So I'm just going to put it back to the start while I wrap up this video. So that's been Tzeentch, or at least a lot of Tzeentch. Not all of it. There's clearly stuff still missing, but that doesn't matter. You know, we've got a good idea of what a lot of the units do and what their stats kind of look like right now. And you'll notice that, especially melee defense, I think universally across all of the Warhammer 3 factions seems lower, and I think it's just because the stat line is different. I think the damage calculation of things are different in Warhammer 3. So we'll have to wait and find out. But, yeah, the stats don't seem to translate perfectly with Warhammer 2, but certainly the patterns of these things can be looked at so we know what each use for these units are. But I'd love to hear from you guys what you think of everything, whether you think, you know, certain things synergize well, or if there's an interesting combo I haven't found, or if there's some obvious thing that I've missed, or you know, whatever. Let me know your thoughts, basically, because I'd love to hear all of those. Brilliant. Okay, guys, comment, like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, guys. Have a good one.